Maybe let's shift to a quick topic that you said that you had some views and you had heard a podcast by a gentleman named Shankar Vedanta on NPR.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this kind
Yeah.
of connects to an earlier subject, which was why are we seeing this resurgence, not resurgence so much, but explosion in people being fascinated with conspiracy theories and during this time of the pandemic. I think we did touch on that, but what are your own thoughts and the thoughts that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think conspiracy theories definitely pop up because mainly because it's something to believe in. And I think that, we've lost our faith in a lot of ways, in a lot of systems. And I think that ultimately it's because we've seen and we've experienced so many traumas collectively that have happened in our world. And in order to make sense of these traumas, we create these stories. And then the stories just become easier to swallow.
Mm,
And the stories are easier for us to attach belief to because because of the lack of faith that we have in humanity, in our society, in the collective consciousness. And it's just it allows a way for it just allows a way for people to connect in a different way, because then if you find, each conspiracy theory has its people, right? And so then the people that subscribe to that conspiracy theory, that's like a form of community, and so and in that brings comfort for a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's because we want to believe. And I think that having faith has become a thing that we have struggled with, especially when a large percentage of people have experienced trauma. And
right.
anytime that we've experienced trauma in life and we have been told through different religious organizations that we might have been that we are a part of or have been a part of in the past, and the different religions are saying that God is here, is all loving and protecting, and that's like the ultimate gist of what God is. And then you have an experience that's extremely traumatic, and then you are automatically thinking like, well, there can't be a God if God allowed this to happen, right? So that it's you shut down your faith right there, you know. And then that leads to a whole other topic to me about skeptics, which is for another day. But
Yes.
yeah, it leads right into that because, ultimately, if you had something that was so traumatic that it made you shut down your ability to believe, having conspiracy theories it's a way to allow you to make these pieces to reignite your ability to believe again, which is ultimately what we want, but not in the sense of creating these stories on things that necessarily aren't true, you know. But I do think that we need to figure out another way to satiate the need to believe again.
Wow. You know what I really appreciate about you, Naja, is that you you broaden the horizon of every topic that we have talked about. And
Hmm.
that's why we have talked about so many things.
Yeah.
But what you also point out a beautiful thing, which is our need as humans to believe,
Mm-hmm.
have faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that just triggered to me as a kid growing up or as a young teenager, I was obsessed with the X-Files.
Yeah.
And their slogan was there was this kind of flying saucer, and underneath there was the slogan, I want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
That was the on the the hero of the movie was the FBI agent
Yeah.
delving into all these conspiracy theories, mostly to do with aliens. But yeah, there is this kind of deep need, and you highlighted this. I think because we don't have this perhaps immediate history, because we've been cut off and dismissed ancestral history. So then there is a which I think provides also a container and meaning to life.
Yeah.
And of course, there is also truth to most of it. So when that is cut off, what do people fall back on
Yeah.
when these traumas happen? There's no container. And oftentimes I think I was hearing this recently. This was kind of a puzzle to me. because oftentimes even in certain spiritual circles, traumas are not really given attention because they're like, oh, you're already the self, you're the spirit, and the spirit hence is free of trauma. So, so that's sounds like good, but oftentimes it's not accessible
Mhm.
to the person. And so that doesn't really help anyone. But and another point was, some people might have the same set of events happen to them, which traumatize them, but the same event might not traumatize one person, but another person gets traumatized. And I always wondered why that was. And the answer that I heard from someone in some kind of a podcast, I believe, was that how the people around you support viewing the trauma. So I was like, wow, that was like a light bulb. I'm sure there are
Mm.
other reasons,
Mhm.
but your immediate family or whatever the people around involved in the trauma or who were witnessing that, if that supported your witnessing of that process, it might completely free you from that trauma
Yeah.
and while it was happening. So anyways, I don't know if you had to say something, but I really love that you connected these various aspects of.
Yeah, and I think like on a more like a physical level, when we talk about trauma and what it does inside of like the physical body, is that like, we have the autonomic nervous system. It's like a fight or flight, right? Or that's like the one aspect, which is like the sympathetic, and then the parasympathetic is like rest and digest. Those are like the main ones that we talk about. And then one that we don't ever really talk about is the freeze, is what happens in the freeze state, because and that's when we really experience trauma, it's the freezing. That's what happens. And physiologically in the body, what that looks like is like the actual blood that circulates in a person's body freezes, and it
Hmm,
stops moving and it becomes stagnant. And then that's when people start to have all sorts of like nerve pain, neuropathies. They have, all these really interesting things that are chronic conditions that show up. It tends to come from when physiologically, when you've experienced trauma and the body just freezes, literally freezes. And so, yeah, and that's why it's really important, like you said, to when that happens, it's like you have to like unfreeze yourself. And sometimes that does come along in lines of like reliving traumas, unfortunately. Or if you
right,
know someone that can help you safely walk, through it in a more spiritual way, it's very helpful too.
right. Fascinating. Yeah. And so we touched on a lot. Is there anything that comes to you? I'm sure that you have been thinking about the subject of how to process collective trauma. I mean, we're currently living in a time where a lot of trauma is resurfacing.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm sure people think that pandemic has also traumatized in some way. I have actually been seeing it more as a positive, as allowing stuff to come to the surface so it can be dealt with in a way.
Mhm.
But anyways, I was just curious to see. Ha- I'm sure you've contemplated this.
Yeah, yeah. And there's like in a lot of different ways. And like the like how to release collective trauma is like with the light. Like operating from the light, and like what that looks like for each individual might be different, but ultimately it's like the highest energetic, just the highest energy on that we know of is love, like unconditional love, and really embodying that, operating from like a place of compassion can really help to heal a lot of that. And when you think about the beings and the people and the animals that have suffered, and holding them in light, and whatever that looks like for you, whether it's just the thought, you know like a short visualization, or with crystals and stones, having conversations with people about like, you know what this looks like to you, what this means, like how we're talking right now. This conversation is like being held in the light because of what the topics that we're covering. And yeah, it's an interesting thing because yeah, we are all a part of it. Even the dark part, we're all a part of it. But how do we get past it? How do we move through it? Is that we have to continue to hold ourselves and everyone else in the light and keep shining that, and eventually it'll outweigh the part that's dark, and that dark part will eventually completely go away. But until then, we just have to keep holding that light, holding that space for humanity.
that is very inspiring, and I like that how you kind of simplified it, that to keep operating from the light. And I
Hmm.
think that that by itself is probably that is everything. That's the whole of the thing, is if you can keep doing that, then
Yeah.
only good things can come out of that place.